I think we all have that like checklist in our head of everything that needs to get done. And then we get overwhelmed and then we get mad at ourselves and we shame ourselves for not being able to do everything all at once, all the time. So like taking a step backwards and really reflecting on it. And then just like moving with intentionality in your business. Like I said, finding that alignment and things, setting those boundaries, making sure that we're building something that feels good to us. And if it doesn't, being okay with shifting and being flexible.
Welcome to the Rebel Energy Podcast with me, your host, Jade Ellsbury. I'm a corporate dropout and multiple six-figure online business owner. My mission is to help you get out of the 9-to-5 mindset and create a new narrative for moms working from home to gain more freedom, more income, and living your dream life by cultivating your own rebel energy. So grab a glass of wine, get comfy, and let's dig in. Hi, Rebels. I am so excited to be here with Kyrie today. She is a confidence coach. She's actually come and talked to my Rebel Energy Academy clients. And I love the insight and value that she gives, not only on those trainings, but also too on her Instagram. So I'm so excited to have her here today and share that value with you guys as well, too. So do you want to give us a little bit of background on what you do and why you do it?
Sure, yeah. I feel like I do a lot of things, which I think is for all of us as entrepreneurs, we just do all of the things all of the time. And so that's really who I gravitate to is like the other women that are just like trying to do it all and have it all and be it all. And so I started my podcast, The Confident Mompreneur, a little over 3 years ago now. And it kind of started this entire thing for me where I just like found that this was a group of women that we really needed to like band together and find connections with each other because it feels so lonely when you're in it, I think. And like you're the only one going through some of the hard, difficult things that you're going through. And so that's why I started it. And that's what I love to do is just like help women see that we can get through hard things, do hard things, and be all the things.
I love that. So you actually started the podcast first and then went into coaching?
Yeah.
So did you get a lot of feedback from listeners, I'm assuming, or like tell me a little bit about that journey?
So I started I always say it like I've been an entrepreneur my entire life. Like I've always like had something that I've done, like even as a kid it was like, selling massages or like I would do tips for flips or whatever. So I always had something going, but my first official business, I started a nonprofit while I was actually going to school as a mom and non-traditional student. I had like dropped out of college twice before that and decided to go back and finally finish my degree in business. And, when you have a kid relying on you, it makes you work a little bit harder for it.
Yes.
So I went to school, started my nonprofit, and that was really my first big step on to entrepreneurship. But also I was like this very poor college student. And I was like, I really need help in like getting this going and knowing what I'm supposed to be doing as a business owner and like not feeling so alone. But also, I can't afford a coach or any of those things. So I was like, let's start a podcast. Then I can learn from all of these people that I get to come on. And so it was like a way for me to get like some free kind of trainings and coaching from all of these wonderful women that I had like known either personally or in the online space. And I figured if it's helping me, it's got to help other people too. And so that's kind of why I started it. And then it just grew from there. And I just saw that this was a huge need in the space and that there's not really a ton of like women's entrepreneurship mixed in with like other things on podcasts anymore. And I think that's really important because us as women, we don't tend to put things in nice, neat little boxes like men typically do, where it's like work is in this box and family life is in this box
Yeah.
and whatever. It all tends to blend together. And so I really wanted to have that element on my podcast too, where we talk about business, but we also talk about family life and we talk about like the difficult things that we're going through. We talk about pregnancy. We talk about like literally everything that you could be going through on there.
I love that so much because, yeah, as women, I think it's a lot harder to compartmentalize.
Mhm.
And maybe I'm totally way off base on that, but I know with my clients, a lot of the things that I hear is like the work-life balance. And I can't remember who it was, and it was actually like a year ago. Okay. So I mean, this whole time I'm thinking in my head, when am I gonna get to that work-life balance? Even though they have a huge team, right? And I don't work as much as I used to the majority of the time. I keep thinking, when am I gonna have this work-life balance? And I think we had another guest speaker come and talk to my clients, and they're like, there's no such thing as work-life balance. And
Nope.
I love that message. So maybe it was you, now that I think about it, but that's the first time I heard that because as women, I feel like that's something we're always striving for, and I'm like, "Damn," like, I'm like 3, 4 years in, like, when is that gonna happen for me? And I think the thing that I've really embraced with hearing that is, like, it really just depends on the season of life you're in, and as an entrepreneur, there's always those ebbs and flows where, with me just, like, moving recently, I was able to really rely on my team and, like, really unplug to, like, get everything fucking moved, you know? And there's other times where, maybe business isn't doing so well. So I am working more and not hanging out with my kids as much. So, yeah, what are your thoughts on that?
So, I think it definitely was me when I came in and worked with you guys that said this, but
I love
I
that. That's so
hate the
funny.
term work-life balance. I always talk about it as a harmony, like, we only have 100% to give. We
Yeah.
can't split that evenly between everything all the time, so it's like you said, like finding those ebbs and flows in, okay, well, my business is needing more of my time and attention right now. And then once we get through this, I'm going to put more time and attention into my family so that I can kind of like get that harmony back in my life.
Yeah.
And so really being able to move with the ebbs and flows of life instead of like trying to stick ourselves on this very strict 50-50, like 50% work and 50% family thing because there's always gonna be things that come along and screw us up and make life hard, and we've gotta be able to, like, balance and flow with that instead of, like, holding so tightly to what our ideas of what a mompreneur should look like, if that makes sense.
Oh, totally. Because I'm also very type A. And one thing that I've really been struggling, I mean, and I'm talking like recently, I think with like the move and thing, like having a fucking house built, is like I'm not in control. And I
Yeah.
just, I'm like, I just can't wait for like the morning. Like, I'm that person where if like I don't have a routine in place, I feel out of control. If my office is not set up, I feel out of control. And it kind of becomes like this spiral that kind of just affects, I feel like everything in life. Like the way that I show up as a mom, right? Like that anxiety shows up. I have less patience when I'm out of my routine and not making that time for myself.
Yeah, absolutely, and I love that you bring that up. It's so funny because I talk about this all the time, right? But I still struggle with it constantly, which I think is part of, like, what makes you an expert if you've struggled through it yourself, and, like, you've found systems or things to put in place to help you through it. But I was just talking to my therapist about this last week because I am very also type A, and I think that's something that a lot of us probably have in common is like
Yeah.
that type A personality. We like to do things a certain way. We like to have lots of things going all at the same time, but we have systems in place to be able to deal with it. And I got out of my system of like cleaning my house. And then all of a sudden, all of my dishes built up. And it got to the point where I couldn't do it all at once. So I just didn't do it at all. So, I had to be reminded that it's okay to take things in bite-sized pieces, like, instead of trying to focus on doing everything all the time 100% out, take things in bite-sized pieces as you can. So, if you find yourself in a busy time of life like you are right now with a baby and building a house, like, that obviously takes up a large chunk of time. Just
Yeah.
take smaller bites at the end of the day and be able to, like, you said rely on your team that's there for you and be able to be flexible and say, "Hey, I couldn't work much today, so I'll work a little extra tomorrow. And we talked about this before in our training too, is like we forget that we're entrepreneurs and we have the freedom to be able to do that. We don't have to stick to a 9 to 5 schedule.
Yep.
I work sometimes, from 8 o'clock until midnight on
Yep.
my business, and that works for me because that's when my house is quiet, my kid's in bed, I can turn on the TV, I can focus, and I can do the few things that need to be done, and that's okay.
Yeah, I love that so much because I even just yesterday I was like, okay, I just have to accept the fact that um, you know, especially with building a house, like there's always going to be projects and things like that. And, especially with the baby. And then, I have my other two boys 50% of the time. And so and managing an entire business. Like we are busy, my kids are in sports, like life is crazy. And I just yesterday I told my fiance, I'm like, I'm just gonna have to accept the fact that I don't have a full week to sit and unpack my entire house or just focus, like even just unpack my office and get that organized. And I'm like, we're gonna be living here forever. And so I'm just going to be okay with like maybe focusing on one room every week or every 2 weeks, and it's not gonna be an overnight thing where it's done, like the last time we moved, where we had everything unpacked and done in the first week. We didn't have a newborn. I didn't have my business wasn't where it is now. That was 3 years ago. Like, so much has
Right,
changed and our life is different, and like you said, right? Like, we forget we have the freedom. I think that 9 to 5 is ingrained in us so much where, it's like, "Oh, I get my kids from school at 3," and it's like, "Oh, no, I can't work. No, I can work. I can work after they're in bed. I can get up tomorrow a little bit earlier," or whatever we want that to look like.
right. Absolutely. And I think the true key there is like just being flexible, right? Flexible and giving ourselves grace as we're going through things and being willing to adjust and change, which I know for me as a type A person has been really hard
Not
to kind of
flexible.
like
I'm not.
work through. I know I'm not very flexible either. I'm working
We
on it.
want the flexibility, but we're not good at it.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, I will say over the last few years, I've definitely gotten better about,
Yeah.
accepting what I can or cannot change
Yep.
and being able to, accept new opportunities as they come up and be able to say no to things that maybe I would have said yes to a couple years ago, and just really being able to be like, okay, I have a vision for where I'm going, but the steps to get there may not be the exact steps that I think they're going to be, and it may take a little longer than I expect it to be because life comes and gets in the way of things, and that's okay too.
Tired of making 3K in your virtual assistant business? In Rebel Energy Coaching, we have multiple tiers to help you grow and expand your income within your online service based business. I've been able to build $1 million brand, but it stemmed from creating a solid foundation as a virtual assistant. And that's what we help you do in Rebel Energy Academy. We don't just help you get started, we help you discover your purpose online. DM me GROW if you are ready to scale to 5K and beyond. Yeah. So, what would you say is one thing that you see, or maybe even a couple things, when you're coaching women that you see them struggle with the most as entrepreneurs?
I think it's like the idea that they're not going where they want to fast enough,
Oh, yeah.
or that, they can't do all the things that they want to do right now. And I think that's really the hardest thing for us because we all have this like vision in our head of like how things are going to go and the exact steps that we're gonna take to get there, whatever. Um, but I think too often people either like rush into things without really thinking it through and like understanding if it matches their vision of like what they're wanting, where they're going, or whatever. Or they're too cautious and they just never move forward with anything
Mhm.
because they're afraid of like stepping into kind of that unknown, or they're like saying that they'll do it when things slow down, which we all know things never slow down.
I hear that all in jest. Now is just not the best time.
Yep.
When is it going to be the best time? And I love that you bring up all those points because as a virtual assistant coach, I see like I work with, women that are now just entering the entrepreneur world and they come in the program and they compare themselves to other people. Well, so and so has gotten 3 clients, like, and I haven't gotten any. Okay, well that person, right, like has this skill set, or they already have invested before, or they've been a VA for a year already. So I think, or like what you said too, the understanding. A lot of them set these goals without understanding maybe like how much work it's going to be, or understanding that, like, hey, before you go and promote your services, right? Like, I want to land a client in 2 weeks. Awesome. I just did a client case study this morning with Emily. She landed her first client within 3 days of working with us. However, right, is that the norm? No, it's not the norm. And so I think having them take a couple steps back, like, hey, we got to do the market research, or we got to do this first, or we got to figure out your skill set, who's your ideal client, and things. So, all 3 of those points that you bring up, I see that every single week with women.
Yeah. Well, and I definitely am like one of those people that I like will jump straight into something right away because I like get this idea and then I'm like, okay, I'll make it happen. And I just make it happen. But then, like, a week or two goes by and there's no traction on it. And I'm like, why is this not like working? I did all the things. I promoted it. I launched it. I did whatever. But then I look back at it and I'm like, does it actually align with what I want to be doing 5 years from now? Does it align with the clients that I have now? Well, probably not. So is it actually in alignment with what I should be doing? And sometimes I think that's really hard because I have lots of ideas and I think every single one is going to be this giant winner and things are going to be perfect every single time. And so I just jump straight into it. But I think that intention plus action is what creates real results, is having both of those things at the same time.
Yeah. And one thing that makes me giggle a little bit is when I hear, I'm a multi passionate entrepreneur. Hello, we are all
Yes.
multi-passionate, right?
Yep.
Even for me, so this podcast, it's so funny I'm bringing it up because as a virtual assistant, and pivoting into coach, I was like, okay, I want to have a podcast and I want to do this and I want to do that and I want to write a book. And I remember my coach saying one thing, like, you cannot be a new coach, right? Like, we gotta get you clients first, because if you don't have a sustainable business, if you don't have a sustainable monthly income, right? If you're not paying your bills, you can't go and create a podcast, you know? And so for me, again, I'm just like you. I'm a very impatient person. If I have an idea or something, it's like, all right, I want to go do this right freaking now. And, as a mom, and especially with having a new baby, I feel like sometimes I'm like running in place, and, it's like these other things are kind of pulling me back.
Yep.
Um, and at the end of the day, though, I'm also kind of grateful for that, because if I didn't have those other responsibilities, I think I'd be all over the place. Like, you know,
Yep.
gosh, 4 years ago, 5 years ago when I was a brand new coach, it was like I totally would have just gone and done the podcast then. But would it be successful like it is now? Probably not, because I would come from this place of having way too much on my plate and constantly be worried about not making enough money to support the passions that I do have.
Right, absolutely. And I think that's really cool to point out is like making sure that like you're being taken care of, not just like your clients are being taken care of through what you're doing too.
Yep,
I think especially when you're a coach or like in this online space, you feel like people should have access to you 100% of the time.
yep,
And that gets really heavy and really hard after a while, especially when you're like dealing with your own crap, personally on the side too. And so I think it's really important, like, to set those boundaries in whatever business you're in of like, this is how much time I actually can spend doing this. This is how much money I actually need to make this work for my family.
Yeah.
For me, like, I have a full-time job that I do virtually as well, and that provides the income that I need and the stability that I need to then do all of my other multi-passionate things that I love to
Yeah.
do. But, I made sure that I had that in place so that I could do that. And so just, like, really finding those boundaries and setting them and sticking to them, which is really hard.
Oh, I agree. Yes. And what you said about having people having constant access to you. Um, as a new VA and even as a new coach, that was something really hard. But what I've learned about myself is I will go, 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 go until I burn out. And so
Mm,
for me, it was turning off all of the notifications. I know some people even have like a separate phone. For me, turning off notifications is like totally fine. Again, it was really difficult to be like, no, don't open your Instagram DMs. Don't open Facebook Messenger. Don't
yep.
don't
It's
give people your cell phone number, to be able to really protect basically what we've built, right? Like we didn't start a business to work 24/7. So why am I working 24/7?
yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
I love that. So what would you say to any women that might be struggling right now with the confidence piece of being an entrepreneur?
I think that's a really hard piece, especially when you're getting into something new. It's always intimidating and it's always scary no matter what.
Yeah.
So I think the confidence piece comes from like that internal knowledge that like you've got what it takes to make it through, no matter if it's hard, easy, or whatever. Um, because we're all gonna face those hard times, like, you're not gonna be able to skirt around them, like, so it's being able to face them head on and say, "I can do this, I can make it through that." And I really think that comes from, like, a lot of internal dialogue and, like, really working on yourself, because especially as an entrepreneur, you are your business, right? So if you're not doing well, your business is probably not going to do well. This kind of goes back to some of like the boundaries that we were talking about. For me, a big part of my confidence journey and things has been like making the time and space for me to take care of myself first. And so like I go to the gym every day, every single
I
day.
see your posts. I'm like, "Oh, I need
Yeah.
what's" I'm on day 2 of working out consistently. I'm
Nice.
in.
Proud of you. That's great. I mean, and it starts with those small steps, like going twice. That's a big step when you haven't gone in, like, months?
Yep.
Um, but, like, intentionally creating that time and space for you to make time for the things that are going to, like, make you feel better about yourself. So for me, that's, like, working out. It's taking time to read books that I enjoy or do journaling or go to yoga or whatever that makes me feel good. Um, I really create a lot of time and space for those things so that I can work on myself. Um, I also think like doing a lot of like journaling or just kind of like that internal monologue where we're asking ourselves like, how am I feeling? Like, what is going on today? What do I actually need to handle today? Because sometimes I think we get just like so overwhelmed in like the hamster wheel of life
Yep.
that we forget to like reflect and be like, okay, is this actually feeling good to me? What can I actually handle today? What actually needs to get done? Because I think we all have that like checklist in our head of everything that needs to get done. And then we get
Yeah.
overwhelmed and then we get mad at ourselves and we shame ourselves for not being able to do everything all at once, all the time. So, like, taking a step backwards and really reflecting on it. And then just like moving with intentionality in your business. Like I said, finding that alignment and things, setting those boundaries, making sure that we're building something that feels good to us, and if it doesn't, being okay with shifting and being flexible. I think back to when I started my business, it looks completely different now than it looked 3 years ago because I'm a completely different person now than I was 3 years ago. And just being able to really kind of look at that and work through it. I think that's where we really find confidence is when we know ourselves well enough to make our business what it needs to be.
Yeah, I love when you said we need to focus on, like each day, what can I focus on today? Because as entrepreneurs, there's always going to be something else that we can do. We can always better ourselves or better our systems or processes or whatever that looks like. And that's me 100%. I get so anxious. I look at my huge to-do list that grows, and so just looking at the to-do list and then going to my calendar and being like, okay, I'm going to put 3 of these tasks, like I've got 1 hour free, I get 3 of these tasks done. And again, like what we talked about at the beginning, just the little by little, um taking those things off our, well, constantly growing to-do list, honestly. But prioritizing them and saying, "Okay, this is not a priority for me today," and that's okay.
Well, and we can definitely create systems that help us like prioritize those things that are most important. Like you said, if it just like means you put an intentional space in your calendar for something. Like I said, for me, I work out every day at about the same time. So if you are trying to schedule a podcast with me, I have very specific hours that I am willing to schedule a podcast. I only schedule one podcast per day. Like those are some of the boundaries that I have set. And so I have systems in place that support those. I don't let other people just schedule back and forth with me through like Instagram messages or whatever, because that's eating into like an hour of my time, right?
Yeah.
Where I could be doing that other million things on my list. And so, like, once you establish those things, put the systems in place to make it happen and make it easy so that you can just like follow through with whatever your intentions are.
Yeah, 100%. This was so, so great. Is there anything else you wanna, or actually too, how can people reach out to you, if they wanna connect with you or even work with you in coaching?
So you can always find me on Instagram. I'm like the most active there. I'm at the Confident Mompreneur. You can also find the podcast there at the Confident Mompreneur Pod. Um, we release new podcast episodes every Wednesday, and we just started our new season last week. And I've got some amazing guests lined up for um, this season that I'm super excited about. You could also go back and check Jade's out with me,
I
which
know,
it
but
was
what
very fun.
season was that?
It was a while ago now, but if you just like look up Jade on the podcast, you can find her episode. It was really great. I love doing it with her. But yeah, those are the best places to find me.
Awesome. Well, thank you so, so much for your time. I appreciate it. And definitely go check her out, guys.
Thank you.